So this video is going to look at the cost of getting planning permission for a listed building, and what you might need to think about. So if you've got a listed building and you're worried that your cost might escalate during planning, and you're thinking about actually how much is this going to cost to get planning permission, whatever the change might be, this video will cover some of those points around that. So the first thing to say is that obviously planning costs vary significantly, whether you are working on a listed building or not. In this instance, specifically around listed buildings, it's really important to establish what you need to do at the outset in order to support the application. Now, for a listed building, that may include additional reports, heritage statements, supporting documentations like ecological statements that all outline what you need to do in order to get planning permission. Getting a sense of what those reports might be at the outset is probably really important, and having a clear structured methodology to get planning is going to help you through the process. So we look at it from a pragmatic, practical perspective and say, actually, what is it you're doing? What bits of the heritage fabric are you impacting? Do we need to get a heritage consultant in? Are they going to charge additional fees to assess the building from a heritage perspective? Do we need to consult on that to external bodies? All of that body of work might form your submission as part of the listed building consent, and all of that does need to be factored in at the outset to be able to gain the best success for your listed building. We'd look at also sort of the application fee. So actually an application fee for a listed building is free. Listed building consent is free. You may need to accompany it with a full planning application to support the development, but the actual listed building consent is assessed free of charge by the council. So there's no planning fee necessarily, but like I say, there may be a fee for the planning permission application for the full planning for whatever it is you're looking to do. Establishing what you're looking to do at the outset is obviously going to be helpful in determining what you need to show the planners and to what extent, and how much more work would be required for a listed building relative to any other building. It doesn't need to be something to fear. We just say, think about it practically, outline what it is you want to do. If there is something that is a bone of contention or you think may be considered contentious, depending on the grading of the building. Remember, listed buildings can have 3 different types of gradings at the moment. So you've got grade 2 star, grade 2 and grade 1, which is the highest grading, which means that the building's fabric is considered to be of the highest order. Then you may want to also think about what it is you're doing, and is it likely to be considered acceptable from a planning perspective. If you are proposing something contentious, then a pre-app is always advisable. Get the planning officers and the conservation officers to look at what you're proposing, and there may be a fee for that as well with the local council, depending on what you're doing. And those initial conversations, although not binding, they can have an impact on the way that you put forward the design, so as to remove anything that might be considered contentious. When you are looking at listed buildings, you may need to do some investigations on the historic fabric of the building, in terms of looking at how it was originally built, planned layouts, and that may involve looking at archive files, and there may be some small costs associated with that as well that you may want to factor in at the outset. So sort of wrapping it all into sort of small segments, understanding what it is you're doing, how you're proposing to do it, and in parallel, what the cost of each of those components to demonstrate why you're doing it is probably going to be a useful strategy going forward in terms of developing a scheme for planning for a listed building consent. And then the costs, you can kind of manage those accordingly once you know what it is you're doing and who you need to support that with. So as we say, listed building consent doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be something that you need to be afraid of, but fundamentally you need to kind of strategically plan it. It does cost more inevitably in terms of consultants fees than a standard planning application, but ultimately with a listed building you also got the heritage value as well of the building, which you wouldn't have. So that's something to just bear in mind when you're thinking about it as well. So I hope that little snapshot on listed buildings and getting planning permission for them and the costs associated with them is useful. There is an accompanying article which goes into a little bit more depth, which you can find just there.